You're listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast with Angela Henderson, episode 118. Hey there, you're listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast. My name is Angela Henderson, and on this show, we talk about improving your business, life, or both by having amazing and rich conversations with brilliant guests who will inspire you and who will give you tips and tricks to help you grow both in life and in business. Well, hey there, and welcome back to another awesome episode of the Business and Life Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ange, from Angela Henderson Consulting, where I'm an international award-winning business consultant and coach who has helped thousands of amazing women business owners get all the pieces in place to have consistent 5-figure months and then on to 6- and 7-figure years without burning out in the process. Content. When I say content, how do you feel? Excited? Nervous? Or maybe somewhere in between. You see, content is an absolute necessity for business survival, and I personally have grown each of my businesses by creating content for my audience. But it's not just content that you need. It needs to be thought out. It needs to meet your audience where they're at, but it also needs to be created strategically for what your goals are for your business. Most businesses I consult with, either my one-to-one clients, my mastermind clients, or my group coaching clients, are on the right track when they first start working with me in regards to creating the content. You see, they're creating and distributing content, but the problem we're seeing is they aren't seeing the results, and it's left making them feel a bit deflated and frustrated. Why? Because not all content is created equal. Why? There has to be strategy. So, if you're putting effort and time to create and distribute content, you don't have a strategy, you're in luck. Because today I'm bringing on the amazing Janet Murray all the way from the UK, where she's going to share with us the 3 types of content that will make you more sales. It is a jam-packed episode, so get ready for awesomeness. But before we get started, this episode is sponsored by my Instagram Mastery for Business Owners with Angela Henderson, a step-by-step program for getting visible, getting booked, and growing your business with Instagram, all for a one-time payment of $27. Many business owners struggle to understand Instagram and are left, again, feeling overwhelmed, not too sure what to post, throwing spaghetti at a wall. But in my new program, Instagram Mastery for Business Owners, you're going to learn about how to get started with Instagram, how to nail your Instagram bio, 4 ways to use Instagram for business growth, what types of content you should post on Instagram, understanding what time to post on Instagram, optimizing your content with hashtags, how to plan and schedule your content on Instagram, and how to measure your data and results with Instagram. There's one module for each of the topics, and it goes for about only 10 to 15 minutes, so it's super quick, super powerful, and really easy to implement. Not to mention, this program also comes with 4 amazing bonuses: my 30-day guide of different Instagram content ideas, my 30 call to actions guide, my 10 free stock images guide, my ideal client guide. You can grab my Instagram Mastery for Business Owners, a step-by-step program for getting visible, getting booked, and growing your business for $27 by simply heading to angelahenderson.com.au, click on the Work With Me button, and from there, click Instagram Mastery for Business Owners for $27, and you'll be on your way. Now, let's hop into today's amazing episode. Welcome to the show, Janet.
Thanks so much for having me.
It is so awesome to have you on the show. As I was saying before we pressed the record button, you and I initially met out in the Philippines when we were in a mastermind at Chris Decker's event. And as I was driving home from this networking event, and I was like, when was the last time I actually spoke to Janet? It was pretty much almost 4 years. So I'm glad to have you on the podcast. But I also just want to say, Janet, it's been really beautiful to see you grow over the last 4 years with your business. Personally, your personal brand has just taken off, not only in the UK, but globally. And it's just awesome to see you kicking ass. So well done for everything you've been doing over the last 4 years.
Oh, thank you. And it's really nice to speak again. We were just having a bit of a catch up, weren't we? And it's really nice to catch up.
Yeah, just to be able to catch up and really just pick up, like there wasn't really that weird, awkward silence. It was like, how are you? What's going on? We were talking about your running. And speaking of running, I always like to ask a fun question, Janet, when my guests come onto the podcast. And I know you are a hardcore runner. Like I look at you, I'm like, damn, Janet is she's good. She's really good. So I know you've done some amazing races because I've seen some photos around the world. You've got these really great medals. I know you do your park runs. So just so the audience gets to know a little bit about you, what is your all-time favorite race and why?
I guess I would have to say the London Marathon. So I've done it, I've completed it 4 times, but I've actually attempted it 5 times. I think I've got that right. But a couple of years ago, it was the hottest London Marathon on record in the UK. And I just got 10 miles in, felt really, really unwell, just pulled up and decided I was pulling out, which was I was so hot, I was feeling so unwell. And so although I love it, I kind of hate it at the same time. So I had to go back the next year and finish it. In fact, I did a marathon, did the Liverpool Marathon, which is in the north of England, a few weeks later, because I just couldn't stand the fact I'd pulled out of it. But yeah, it was the hottest London Marathon on record, and us Brits, we're not good. Well,
you're not good with the hot weather.
I'm not good with the hot weather, and I just felt dreadful. I didn't know. I thought I'd done 10 miles, and I'd actually done 12. That was kind of how confused I was. And yeah, so that was awful. So I love the London Marathon and hate it at the same time.
A love-hate relationship. Now, how much does racing play a role in your business success or your mental status, to grow that business? Does it have much of an impact or not really?
Yeah, definitely. So I run probably or exercise 5 or 6 times a week. And I think you'll know this when you're running your own business. It's just intense, isn't it? And it's just it's not a 9-to-5 job. You're on it all the time.
No.
Your mind's going as well. And actually, I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD as well, which is probably a whole other podcast. So exercise has been it's really helped me to kind of keep on top of my head and keep my mind in order and kind of switch off at the end of the day. So I tend to go out running or doing some kind of exercise at the end of the day. I know some people do it at the beginning, but it really helps. It just keeps me sane.
Keeps you calm. Yeah, listen, you're talking to someone with ADHD, and I believe ADHD, there's a superpower in us, but I also think it can also be our worst enemy at times, when we...
Wow, I didn't know that. I'd never heard you talk about that before.
So I do talk a little bit, probably more about my anxiety and depression that I've had. I've been in remission for 2.5 years now from some workplace bullying in my primary job before I kind of went full time. And but the ADHD, again, it's strong, it's real. I have to work exceptionally hard to make sure that I stay on track, and so I can appreciate having to have an outlet, right? Because again, our brains don't seem to really shut off sometimes. Well, mine doesn't. I can't speak for you, but yes, mine definitely doesn't. And so when you're kind of running, also working through your own ADHD, running a very successful Udemy business, can you just tell us briefly a little bit about where you started and where you are today?
Yeah, so I actually started life as a school teacher, actually. So I taught English in secondary schools in the UK. And I didn't hate it or anything. I quite enjoyed it. But I found quite quickly I was quite burnt out quite quickly. I was working really, really long hours. If anyone's ever worked in teaching, it's the hardest job I've ever done. You're on your feet all day. You're working with kids who can be really challenging. I was working with secondary aged kids, so 11 to 18. And then I was going home and planning and marking books and whatever. And it just felt too much early on. So I decided to retrain and become a journalist. So that really suited me. And I think particularly having kind of a low attention span as well. With journalism, you're often only ever working on one assignment at a time. Right. So you obviously you might be balancing different things, but you get one assignment done, then you move on to the next one. It's quite kind of fast paced. The deadlines are quite kind of short, and so if you're the kind of person like I was, who at school you got your homework done on the last minute, then it works really well for you. And then I kind of so I really enjoyed journalism. I did it for 18 years, and I was freelance the whole time because I never wanted to be kind of tied down to a particular organisation. But I wrote for national newspapers like the Guardian, and I used to get offered, people used to approach me and pay me to do consultancy to help them to get press coverage. So I would get organisations, because I specialised in education and politics. So education organisations would approach me, could you come and do some training, some consultancy, show us how to deal with the press? And then I started to think to myself, this stuff's good. It's a lot more well paid than journalism. Yes. So I kind of thought, how can I get more of this stuff? And how can I get people to kind of find me beyond my current network? So I started blogging about it, just like lots of people, I just kind of fell into it. I started this blog where I shared stuff like, how to get press coverage coverage, how to write press releases. That got me interested in search engine optimization. So I'm going to write this blog, how to get people to find it. That got me into email marketing and social media. And suddenly I was like, oh, actually, maybe I could make some money out of this. Maybe I could sell online courses or memberships. And so it all kind of just, and I got to the point where I was starting to get a bit bored of journalism. I was starting to feel like I needed a new challenge. So I kind of gradually started to build this online business up, which was around, initially press and PR and teaching people how to get their own press coverage. I started a podcast, which I've still got now. I've pivoted the podcast along with my focus. And I wrote a book about it. I'm speaking about it. And then one of the things, we just spoke about this before, that I found quite frustrating is, like, if I was to move to Australia, where you're based tomorrow, or Canada or whatever, I would use exactly the same strategies to get press coverage, because it's just a strategy or a framework.
Yes.
But I found that people would often, and I was, I'm a speaker as well, so I wanted to get booked on to speak on international stages. But I found that sometimes it was a bit limiting, because people would say, yes, but you know how the press works in the UK and you've got all the context. But what about, more widely? And the other thing as well that I started to realize is that press and PR really only works like if you're doing your other content well. So,
yes, it almost like goes, it's a part of the puzzle, but not all of the puzzle.
Yeah. And, you could get a really great piece in a national newspaper or be in the radio or the TV, but actually then if people go to your website and then there's nothing there's no content, or there's nothing, you don't have much of a following on social media, you don't have much of an online presence, then it's kind of like a wasted opportunity. So I started to realize that this content piece, because press and PR, it's just a form of content.
Exactly.
It's on someone else's platform. I started to realize that actually, if I wanted to really help people to get big results, because people would get press coverage and they'd be really happy with it, but like, well, where are all the sales? Like, why am I not getting loads of sales? And so I wanted to help people, like, be really honest with them about like what it actually takes. And for me, I mean, the media has changed a lot, but you can be your own media now. Like, you don't have to get coverage in somebody else's publication or somebody else's platform. You can create your own platform, your own media, your own publishing house, I think Gary Vee calls it. And actually that can be much more powerful if you're creating your own platform, your own content. You're not relying on, a journalist to say yes or no, or an editor to say yes or no to you, or a TV producer. Like you are in control of how you grow this content platform. So I started to sort of gradually teach more of that. And then I kind of thought, what, I just really love teaching this content in a broader way. And the thing that people used to say to me all the time was, the phrase I used to hear was, I need to build my audience. I need to build my audience. I need to build my audience. And, I need to have more followers. I need more subscribers. I need my platform to be bigger. I need more podcast listeners. I need more YouTube subscribers, whatever it might be. And that was the phrase that I kept hearing. I need to build my online audience. So that's really where I've taken it. So nowadays I help people to build online audiences. So that's generally more followers, more fans, more subscribers. I'm completely cross-platform. And how do you build your audience? You build your audience through great content. So I'm using the same set of skills, the journalism skills, understanding what makes great content, what's engaging to people and what isn't, but just applying that to building online audiences. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, no, 100%. And I like that. Again, really some of those skills that you had as a journalist, like you said, have been able to be transferable skills. And I think often people forget about that. You may have worked in a corporate job doing X, Y, and Z, but those skills still, if you think about it strategically, can still come into your business in some way, shape, or form. So, what a great opportunity for you to capitalize on what you've learned in the world of journalism. And again, we're going to talk about great content, because I'll hold that thought, right? Because there's content, but there's shit content, there's quality content, Janet, right? So I think, hold that thought, because it's a question I've got for you. But I know today we're obviously wanting to talk about sales, because I think a lot of people, I know a lot of people come to me, I need more sales, I need more sales, I need more sales. Well, we all need more sales. Really, we all love more sales. Who doesn't? We all want to increase our revenue to some point. But it's not just typically about the sales. You can't just be salesy. You can't just jump. I always say it's about like asking someone for sex, right? You can't just go from going, hey, Janet, nice to meet you in the bar. Or not even Janet, hey, you stranger, meet me in the bathroom for a quickie. It's normally like, hey, Janet, how are you? Can I get your phone number? Can I text message you? Can I take you out for dinner? It's a process. And I think, again, warming your audience with great content before you go in for the jugular, for the sale, right, is similar. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Totally, and that's the way that I often explain it to people. It is like asking somebody to bed on a first date. And the question I often ask people is, have you ever bought anything cold off a Facebook ad, for example? I think I've bought two things. So I've bought this running belt, this thing that I carry my phone in when I'm running, and it was just exactly the thing that I needed. But of course, it wasn't random because I was targeted because of my interest. But that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. And I also bought this beanie hat for running. So like I bought this hat, like, because I used to find that my hat used to fall off my head because I've got really thick hair, and I saw this ponytail hat where you can loop your ponytail through. But again, that wasn't cold because I've been targeted, because obviously Facebook targets me because it knows what pages I look at and subscribe to. Totally. So it's not cold at all, actually. But that's the question I often ask people is like, do you buy stuff cold of a Facebook ad? Probably you can count on the number of on your fingers how many times you've done that, because most of us, we need to get to know a person, we need to get to know the brand. We need some time, like we need to get to know them, we need to get awareness of who they are, what they do, what the brand's all about, and we need to go on a bit of a journey with people. And I think what people try and do is they fast forward the journey and they go straight to the sale. And so the way that I encourage people to do it is to create content that meets people on the stage of the journey that they're at. So making sure you've always got content for people. If people have known you for a while, they've been in your space for a while and they're ready to buy, you've got content for those people, but you've also got content for people to bring new people in who maybe don't know about you, don't know anything about your business, your brand, how you help people. You've got that content for them, but then you've also got content for the people that are on the fence. And I can kind of take you through those three types of content if that's helpful. But there's one. So
go ahead. No, that will be super helpful. There's just a few things that I kind of want to lay the foundations of before we jump straight to those three types, because my thing is I just want to describe you and I, because we've been in this space for a long time. We know what content is. There's different types of content, but for the listeners, especially for the new ones that could be listening to this, can you just define, like, what does content mean to you?
Yeah, so it's really difficult, isn't it? Because it probably means something different to everybody, doesn't it? But for me, it's something that you publish, which is designed to engage somebody in some way, to build a relationship with them. So it can be written content, it can be video, it can be a podcast, it could be an infographic, it could be, I'm trying to think of other forms of content that you might create. What other things might you do? There's all sorts of things, leaflets, it could be website copy, it's anything that you create, any kind of communication that you create, which is aimed to sort of help you build a relationship with somebody. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I just always kind of like, just because, like I said, I never want to assume that all the listeners understand. So I was kind of like, let's lay the kind of benchmark so that, because you and I are very similar about what we're talking about. And with content, Janet, how important is content for both service-based and product-based businesses from a growth perspective? I guess if I take it one step further, with content, like, is it like quality content? Is it just content? Like, how important is it for both of those kind of businesses to be able to produce, good content?
Equally important. And I get asked the question all the time, does your advice apply to, in my case, often product-based businesses? People can see how it applies to service-based businesses, but they can't necessarily see how it applies to products or how it might be important. But actually, even with products, it's even more important. And I can give you lots of examples as we go, because I sell products. I have a media diary that I sell of physical products.
Yes.
And I've got a number of physical products, and the approach is exactly the same. It's about understanding that customer journey, understanding, that somebody, when they first come across you or your brand or your product or service, they're probably not ready to buy and they need to get to know you. So for me, content is about getting to know you. It's about replicating online. You said you just came from a networking event. When we meet people in person, you don't just run up to them, do you, and go, buy my stuff, come and work with me. You have a conversation with them, you listen to them, you try and find a bit more about them, you try and understand what their problems are, and then that's when you start to move towards that conversation about how your product or service might but you don't start selling stuff to people without really understanding them, or so for me, content is about really understanding people and understanding whether your product or service might be a good fit for them, getting to know each other. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, totally. And to take it, I guess, that one step further, a lot of people will be going, yeah, well, I'm producing content. I produce content every day, Janet, right? But there's content and then there's content, Janet. Let's be honest. You know what I mean? There's like content and then there's like content on steroids, right? is it like how important it is? Like I'm from the basis of I'd rather produce 3 quality pieces of content than 20 pieces of shit. What are your thoughts?
Totally.
Like how important is quality versus quantity?
Like totally agree. Like it's better to do like one blog post or one podcast a month, but really make it good and also really promote it as well. A lot of people just pump out content, you know, they create a blog post and they put it out once and they never revisit it. It's better to do, you know, one really good piece of content less frequently, but actually it'd be a really good quality piece of content, but crucially promote the hell out of it and get it in front of as many people as possible. That would always be my view.
And I also would go one step further on that. If you're producing a quality podcast or a quality YouTube, do you know what I mean, video or a blog article, learn how to optimize it. Learn what those keywords are. Learn so that I call it spike marketing is a word that I don't necessarily think I've coined it, but I use it as that when you post a blog or a YouTube or whatever, after that first time, it's like you get spiked traffic, right? So it's like it's been marketed, you get that spike in traffic and then it just kind of goes away. I think you've put all that hard work into producing this really great piece of quality content and then it just lays dormant unless you keep repurposing it and you've got it like almost on like a scheduled promotional tool, right? So my thing is learn how to optimize it, because once you learn how to optimize it, you not just have you don't see the spikes, you'll start to see regular traffic constantly. So you're getting to me a very more holistic approach about how your content can be used for you long term and not just short term.
Yeah, totally. And like I say, I think so many people create a piece of content and then they're just on to the next thing. It's much better to think, well, how can I repurpose it? How can I take this blog post and turn it into social media posts? How could I take this email? You know, I repurpose a lot of my email marketing, for example, and turn it into social media posts and sales pages and all sorts. It's taking every piece of content and thinking, how can I almost like wring it dry so that I can turn it into as many different pieces of content, as many different formats as well. The other thing we have to remember is that, you know, we both like podcasts because we're podcasters and we like listening to podcasts. Not everybody likes podcasts. So how can we take that information and present it in a way that will appeal to somebody who prefers video or prefers written content or infographics or whatever, which can sound quite exhausting, but actually in the long term, it does save you time.
100%. And I think, again, it's about in my opinion, before you start creating content, I always like to tell my clients is like, survey your audience. Figure out how they're consuming content, because if 90% of your audience is predominantly consuming podcasts and you decided to go start a YouTube channel, you potentially could be utilizing all this time, money, and resources to get a YouTube channel up and your people aren't actually there. So I always say, you know, determine how they're consuming information, start kind of with one platform and then work your way up. You don't have to hit all of them at one time, but just know where your audience is sitting and how they're consuming it. Because if not, you know, you could be doing all this work and not reap any of the benefits.
Yeah, and I think there's another factor as well to take into consideration. So people will often ask me, I have a class actually in my Build Your Online Audience program, which is choose your platform. So it's about, you know, deciding whether you do YouTube or podcast or blog or whether you do Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And people will often, they just want me to tell them what's the right one. Like, tell me that tell me that YouTube is better than a podcast. Like, tell me that a blog post is better than, you know, they want me to they want me to just give them all the research and say YouTube is best for you. But it isn't best for you if you die every time you have to go on video, which means that you keep skipping weeks. You know, you keep skipping weeks because you find it so painful, or the whole process of getting a YouTube video on is just so painful for you. You know, you might be better to do a podcast if that's the case, or you know, if you think podcasting is great because your friends had success with that, but actually, you know, you're really shy, or you find it, I think it's got to be something that you also can show up and do regularly and you feel comfortable with.
100%.
Yeah, I think that's really important too.
Not because you just, then again, the energy is going to come and you're more likely just to give up, right? So again, totally valid point to say, again, not only how are they consuming it, but how does that content you're creating light you up? You know, are you motivated to create it? Because if not, again, it's not going to be quality. It's going to be shit.
Yeah. Now, you're going to be inconsistent.
100%. And that was me with podcasting. I was just like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I paid up front for 6 months with my podcast team. So I knew that I was like, even if I get to 6 months, I've beat the average of, I think, seven podcasts before people start dying. But it was like, okay, 7 months, I can test to see if this truly lights me up. And clearly it does. So, you know, with content though, is all content created equal? Or do business owners need to be thinking about different content depending on the different stages of the buying journey that their customers are on?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's also worth saying as well, unfortunately, I see a lot of business owners who think that just posting content is enough, just showing up and putting it on the schedule. Like you get some people, you get different types of people, I think. And you get some people who are really consistent. They plan everything, they schedule everything, but actually their content isn't very engaging, but they'd rather just get it done than actually have people engaging with it. And sometimes you get people, I would probably put myself more in this camp, that, I mean, I am really consistent. I've published 400, I've just recorded my 414th podcast episode. So I am
so
consistent.
Fun.
But I'm not a massive like months ahead planner or whatever. I would rather create something spontaneously on the day and it be really good and really engaging and people respond to me, because that's the key thing as well. Putting out content, I see people say on LinkedIn, for example, who post something every day, but it's shit. No one ever, no one ever engages with it. And if everything you put out, if nobody ever feels moved to say, oh, wow, that's interesting, or, this is what I think, then it can actually be a bit of a waste of time. But you think you've done it because you've put it on the schedule and you've set it up in a tool like Buffer or Hootsuite or whatever. You think you've done it, you've ticked it off your to-do list, but actually that content's really ineffective. So I think the engagement thing is so important. And obviously I teach people about audience building, but you could have an audience of 200 people that's super engaged and replies to you and has conversations with you about everything you post. You could have, there was an example actually of an Instagrammer who had like 1 million followers and then tried to launch a t-shirt range and couldn't sell a t-shirt, so it's not about the size. I think it's the engagement, does the content you put out engage people? But so hopefully that's helpful too. But then I can talk about the different types of content that tend to engage people, and we can kind of go from there.
I totally agree with you in regards to numbers. I think there's actually a book or an article about like you're better off having 100 true fans than you are to have 1 million, right? Because those 100 true fans will potentially buy from you, but they also become your marketers for you. I know one of my one-to-one clients, they're like 2 of them, they're partners that are working together with me. And one of the things they just launched their Instagram account. We're putting together their Instagram strategy. Their numbers are super small. Like I think they've got less than 100 followers, but they've already had 7 leads just from Instagram, right? Because of the content that they're putting out. It's quality. Exactly. There's a call to action. We've got appropriate hashtags. They're getting to the DM. We're getting the conversions, right? So again, it just goes to show in that example, like numbers don't mean everything. It's no, they truly don't. And it's about getting that conversion. Really, at the end of the day, you're creating content to create conversation and connection, and conversations and connection equal conversions. Because if you don't have conversions, you're not going to really be in business long.
Exactly. And a sign that your content isn't working very well is if people aren't responding, if they're not commenting, if they're not sending you follow-up messages, then there's something that needs to change about your content.
Something needs a little bit of help there.
It needs a bit of help. So I can talk you through the three stages.
I'd love to hear more about like these kind of like 3 main types of content that businesses need to create. And when we talk about, is there a particular order that they need to be creating this content in, or it's just more about the different types?
Yeah, so I would say there's different types, and there might be different orders depending on what you're doing at the time, which I can kind of address. Sure. I actually picked this up it's a friend of mine called Dan Moulton at the UK. He's a marketing expert. It's his thing. I picked it up of him, but now I teach it to everybody because it's so good. Yeah. But yeah, for me, there's 3 main types of content. So the first one is awareness content. The second one is consideration, and the third one is purchase. But I'll break it down for you. Sure. So awareness is when this is kind of for the people who don't really know about your product or service, and they're just online searching to solve their problems. So I think the thing that we all need to know is, what problem does our product or service solve? So to give you an example from my media diary, for example, my media diary, it's an A4 desk diary. It's got key dates and awareness days that you can use to plan out your content. It's got planning templates. So it solves 2 main problems. So one, it helps people who struggle for ideas. So if they don't know what to post on social media, they've got all these awareness dates and it gives them ideas. The second problem it solves is the consistency and the planning. So I've got templates people can use to do annual, monthly, weekly, daily planning. That's all in there as well. So it's really clear the problem that it solves. So the way I would start is think, okay, what problem does my product or service solve? The kind of people who might need my diary, they don't know about my diary yet. because they don't know about me. What might they be what might they be searching for online? So they're probably going to be asking questions like, just like we've been talking, like, what is content? Like, how often should I be publishing content? What type of content should I be publishing? How many times should I post on social media? Should I be on Instagram or should I be on Twitter? So it's just getting inside the head of those people. And I call it like generic content, just content that answers, questions that somebody would have who might buy a product or service like yours, but they're not specific to your product or service. Does that kind of make sense? So just general, what people are, basically what people are Googling when people are like, I can't stick to a content plan, or I can't, I'm trying to think of another example with audience building, like people are generally will be Googling things like, why can't I grow my Instagram following? Or, like, how do I grow my email list? Like, what kind of lead magnet should I create? That kind of thing. So it's starting with that sort of content. So what we're creating on the podcast now is, creating content that answers questions or solves problems that your ideal customer or client has got, without sort of ramming down their throat
by my
service.
Yeah,
just being a helpful person, answering their questions, because of course they're going to be able to find that kind of stuff in Google search. If they're searching on a podcast app, they're going to find it. And obviously there's lots you can do to optimize it to help them find it more easily. But that's the first. Does that kind of make sense? Just kind of answering general questions.
Like you're starting at the basin, you're starting at the bottom line. It's just really about bringing awareness about you, your brand, you're solving some problems. And so then you go into the second type of content, which is, I think you said consideration content.
Yeah, so this is when people, so in the awareness phase, like people are just searching online. They don't care about you or your product or service. They're just looking for a question. They want an answer to a question, and then they go, oh, that's interesting. Angela's got a blog post or a podcast on that. I'll listen to that. Then they're like, oh, I like Angela. Maybe I'll listen to more. So it's that kind of, getting to know you phase. Then the next phase is when people are interested in your product or service, but they've got questions. So those questions, they're often objections, basically. It's the reasons that they wouldn't buy. So this is just about thinking about, just make a list of all the questions that people ask you when they're considering whether to buy your product or service. So with my diary, for example, people will ask, the typical things people ask is, have you got a digital version? They ask, like, how does it compare with other planners? They ask to see inside it. So I've created videos. I've got loads of different videos of me showing inside it, me demoing it. I've got my clients demoing it as well. I've got clients who've sent me videos of them using it. People will ask me, and this is tricky. Sometimes it means going places that you don't necessarily want to go, but I bought your diary last year and I didn't use it. Like, should I buy it again? So it's about addressing that objection. I've got a blog post, which is like what to do if you bought my diary last year and didn't use it. Which you might think, do I really want to promote that? But actually you can give people reassurance, and you can say to them, look, just because you didn't use it last year doesn't mean you won't use it again. So you can actually address that objection. So this is, your fence sitters. So your people, like, just think about all the, if you've got like a product-based business, people might ask, I don't know, if you sell clothes, like, how do I know if it's going to be a good fit? Can I send it back? What happens if I don't like it? What's your refund policy? So all of those. And with coaching, we were just talking about this before we got on this call, weren't we? Like, people saying things like, well, can you guarantee me that I'll get results? And you can answer that stuff really honestly and say, well, no, because you've got to do the work. But it's just thinking about all those barriers, all those reasons that people might have for not buying from you, and then addressing them. Does that kind of make sense? So creating content that addresses it. And this is where testimonials come in, actually. So okay, I keep using my media diary, but it's a really good example because it's really visual. And you could go over and look at my Instagram, which is Jan Murray UK, and you can see like real examples of this. But whenever somebody buys one of my diaries, because it's physical, I encourage people to send me a picture of them using it, or send me a video. And so this is brilliant. I've got highlights in my Instagram story, which is just full of pictures people have sent me using their diary, or, oh my God, it's arrived. I've got a lady in Australia actually who did a whole video demoing in the inside of my diary to her clients, which is amazing. So, you can really kind of create this quite engaging sort of testimonial type content where you're not telling people how good your product or service is. You're getting people to show that, sharing screenshots of happy customers or clients or whatever. That all comes into consideration as well, because it's like that phase where people are like, should I buy from Angela? Shouldn't I buy from Angela? Like, will I get results? Will I not? So your testimonials are really powerful there, because that your testimonials can often be the tipping point where the people decide. I prefer testimonials that are real, like, like that email that somebody sends you, or that post in your Facebook group, obviously ask for permission.
Yeah, 100%.
But I'd much rather see an authentic screenshot. I think it's much more compelling. Or that diary, the lady in Australia who sent me the diary, she just made it. She just put it in her story. It was brilliant. And she was showing people around my diary and saying how good it was and how she was using it. That's gold dust. So that's consideration. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes. So you've got the awareness, you've got the consideration content. And what's the last type of content in order to help increase those sales?
So the next is the purchase content. So this is when you basically, you put a call to action and you put a link saying, here's how to buy. So this might be, I find it's really interesting actually. So again, diary is just a good example because of the way it works. But I don't do many posts where I just say, buy my diary, here's how to buy it, because I find they get a lot less engagement than other types of posts.
Yes.
So I do them. But people, because people just want to have a conversation with you, do they? They want value. They want you to help them. With consideration content, they're having a conversation with you back and forth. You're answering questions that they've got. You will need to do some content which is just straight, like I've just launched this. Here's how you can buy it. But actually, that kind of content can be the least engaging.
Yes.
So along that journey, what you need to also be doing is getting people involved in a conversation with you about your products and services. So again, sorry, I'm going to mention the diary again, but it's an example. But one of the things that we do before it goes on sale, usually in September, October time, is the first thing we do is we put cover choices out. So we will publish 8 cover designs and we'll ask people to vote on which is their favorite cover design, and then based on what they say we whittle it down to 4. So people feel invested, they're part of it. We might do some polls asking people like about the inner pages, like what would you like to see changed. So you're kind of bringing people along on that journey with you. You're not saying buy now and you might have a little wait list that you put on or whatever, but you're getting them involved so they feel invested, part of the conversation. You're asking lots of questions. So when I'm launching a new course or program, I won't just put purchase content out straight away. I might say a week or two before, I'm launching a new Instagram course. These are the topics I'm going to cover. Which one do you think is the most helpful? Or do you think there's anything I've missed here? So you're always getting your audience involved in that conversation. And that probably is more kind of awareness content, because you're discussing your products and services. You're asking people what they think. You're getting them involved, but you're not necessarily getting them to buy.
Yes.
So the purchase content actually is really interesting. It probably is the least effective in terms of just getting those straight sales. Unless, obviously, with your purchase content, if you can put deadlines on it, if you can give some sort of scarcity, so with my diary, for example, when we put it on pre-order, there's a deadline by which they have to order it, and if they order it by a certain time, they get a pre-order price. They also get to choose their guaranteed choice of cover out of 4. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it, but it is all about just thinking, where is that person on the journey? Are they ready to get this? Are they ready to make a purchase yet? And making sure you've always got different types of content going out. So you've got some purchase content. It's not all purchase content. You've got some consideration. You've got some awareness, so that somebody who's finding you for the first time is always going to find something that resonates. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah,
100%. And again, it comes down to the beauty of, you can create these pieces of content, but you're also going to need to make sure that you're being strategic about it. So if you've got your quarter mapped out, I'm assuming that you're going to want to sit down and narrow out, okay, week 1 is going to be more awareness. We need to blend in some consideration. Then we need to do week 2 more some consideration. So it's so important about not only identifying the types of content that you need in order to increase your sales, but how, to me, from a consulting point of view, is how are you tying that into the overall strategy?
Yeah, a lot of it is about timing. So people often ask me, well, how much of each type should I do? And they want me to give them like a percentage. And I'm like, well, it really depends. So on a time when you're launching something new, and we can talk about people who sell the same thing all year round in a second, because I get asked that all the time, then you're probably going to do more purchase type content. It is going to be more salesy, get in now, offer ends today. But in a time when you're not specifically launching something, you're going to be possibly doing more awareness content. So in those phases where you're kind of, launch phase, you've got something new, you're probably going to have, more of a certain type. So that, like you say, it's about being strategic. So I sit down and I plan out my quarter. I'm not particularly organized naturally person, but I look at what I'm going to be selling. That's where I start. I go, okay, so for each quarter, so in this case, we're recording this in Q3, July, August, September. What am I going to be selling? Where are there going to be those natural peak points where I'm going to be maybe pushing something. And then I'll try and coincide a podcast episode. So for example, I'm teaching a class next week on how to launch your own planner. So my podcast episode, it comes out later in the week, is about how to launch a planner.
Exactly
so
right.
once you start to kind of identify what am I going to be selling when, then you can start to build your content around it and go, okay, well, that would be a really good time to run an awareness blog, or that would be a good time to do some consideration content, because I know a lot of people are going to be asking questions. And it all starts to come together beautifully. Like it's like a pattern. You start to see the ways that you can link things together. If you're just doing your content on the hoof, if you're just waking up and saying, what should I do today, you don't get to see those patterns. The other question people ask me a lot is, well, what if I sell the same product or service the whole year round? And what I would say to that is, you shouldn't be selling it the same way the whole year round. If you don't have, most products or services have a natural peak point. So even if you do something like coaching, a lot of people, they start coaching programs in January after Christmas or September. It's just thinking, what are the times when I naturally get more inquiries, or so I've got clients, for example, who sell, sun lounge, not much use for them in the UK, but like sun lounges and beach bags and things like that. So obviously it makes sense to do more content around those products or services in June rather than December.
Right, exactly.
But people will say, and often people, until you sort of sit down and think about it, when are there times that people naturally might want to buy this product or service more? I'll put that on the diary, and then I'll start to build the content around it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, absolutely. But it comes back down to having strategy, right? You need your overall business plan strategy, you need your content marketing strategy, and then you need your sales strategy. But businesses so often, I find, I'm too busy. But again, then they're just throwing things. They're overwhelmed. They're freaking out where the next dollar is coming in. So my thing is like, I don't know if you agree, but the sooner you can sit down, and like I said, I'm ADHD too. Like nothing's ever perfect, but I still have a skeleton model of what's happening. What podcast needs to be recorded in order to feed into this? Like there's I know what's coming, right? The sooner you can start doing that, even if it's not perfect, because I believe, done is better than perfect, is you then start testing. Oh, I did it this well this time. I'm going to do this different this time. I'm going to do this better. Like nothing ever stays the same. I mean, the ocean never stands still. It's constantly moving. And I believe these 3 types of content that you talked about today, it's very similar, because you're going to have to keep testing and moving things in order to make it fit, right? You're not just repeating yourself all the time. It's about understanding your audience, engaging with them, and being able to present in front of them, whether or not that's awareness content, the consideration content, or the purchase content, and meeting them where they're at on their buying journey.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also no harm in having a sales message in every piece of content. So I send a daily email to my list, which some people might say is mad. I literally email my list every single day. And I put a sales message in every single email. These are people who've signed up. I've got about 800 of them now. I've got a much bigger email list, but this is a segment of my email list who've said, yes, I want to hear from you every day. I was really clear up front, said, I'm going to email you every day with some value, with some tips and ideas, a bit of a thought for the day. But I am going to, if there's something that product or service I've got that fits really nicely into what we're talking about, I'm going to tell you about it. And they've agreed to that. So every day I mention something. If I'm talking about a particular topic or, Instagram or whatever, I'll mention that I've got a course. And I do it in my Instagram posts as well. I'll often just add a little PS that says, by the way, you can buy this thing. So it's just about, but that's over years of testing and years of like you say, not just doing it one way forever, just going, okay, that's interesting. That happened when I did that. Why don't I do more of that? Or that didn't work. I'll do less of that.
Yep, totally. Absolutely. No, it's all, I believe everything in business is always about testing. Now, for those listeners, because I know we're going to start wrapping up here, Janet, for those listeners right now, they're like, okay, this is awesome. I didn't really consider these 3 different types of content. What's the one thing they can do today to move their content strategy forward to increase sales?
So the very first thing I would recommend that you do is you sit down and you look at the next quarter, like the quarter that we're in now, if you haven't done this already, and you just ask you, what am I going to be selling when? Like it all starts with sales. And sometimes when people struggle with a content strategy, I often say to them, you haven't got a content problem, you've got a business problem, because they'll say to me, well, I can't create a content plan because I don't know what I'm going to be selling when. So that's what you've got to decide first, is like, okay, so what am I going to be selling when am I having special offers and promotions, or, you know, when am I launching this new thing that I'm doing? Get those on the diary. That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. And you'll probably find that there's maybe, I think most of us probably don't launch more than 1 or 2 things a month. Then you've got something to build it around, and then you can start to go, okay, well, it would make real sense for me to maybe do a blog post about a subject related to that and then just start there. But I think the key place you've got to start is, what am I selling? When am I selling it? And if you don't know that, you've got to go back and do that first, because otherwise you'll never be able to create a content plan.
I agree. And again, you know, for those of you like, oh my God, I have to sell, I believe that selling is your responsibility. It's part of your job description, and you're doing a disservice, right, to people if you're not selling. That's a whole nother podcast, Jenna, but that's my little tip, you know, right there. The one final question is, what do you know now in business that you wish you knew when you first started out?
Oh gosh. Do you know what? I'm not sure that there's anything in particular, apart from just how long it takes to build an audience, and how you're always building it, and how, you know, you look at the outside and you see all these success stories, don't you? And you see these people who've built like a, you know, £1 million business in what it seems to be 5 minutes. but when you look behind, there's usually a sort of 5 or 10 year thing that's gone on behind it. So I think I might have been a lot kinder to myself. And I think the key thing I learned actually when I first got online is I would see people like Amy Porterfield, or who's that guy who had that launch strategy, Jeff
Walker.
And I would try and apply £1 million business strategies to my little business that was, you know, earning a couple of thousand a month. And just realizing that you can't just take if somebody's got a massive audience and £1 million business, their strategies are not necessarily going to work.
Going to work for you.
And I made that mistake a few times in the early days, like, you know, trying to do like, you know, big £1 million business strategies on my little business, and just being realistic about the numbers and how long it would take.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today in regards to the 3 different types of content people should really be thinking about in order to increase their sales and that revenue for their business. But before we sign off, Janet, can you tell us and the listeners, where can they find you so that they can connect with you post podcast?
So the best place to find me is my website, which is janetmurray.co.uk. But on social media, Instagram is where I hang out the most. I'm at janmurrayuk, and that's usually the best place to connect with me. Come and send me a message over on Instagram.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. And before we sign off, please remember that my team and I will also be putting together the show notes for this episode at angelahenderson.com.au. And as I mentioned earlier, if you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it, especially over on Instagram stories. You can tag me at Angela Henderson Consulting. Make sure to tag Janet also. You can share it wherever Janet and I don't care. And again, for the rest of you, I hope you have a beautiful day no matter where you are in the world. And I look forward to you joining me again next week for another amazing episode of the Business and Life Conversations podcast. Thanks again, Janet.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast with Angela Henderson. www.angelahenderson.com.au